names as well. So guys, my name is Usman Obaid. So I'm the director and registered migration agent at APG Sydney. And today we'll be talking about IT and PR pathways for IT students. Okay, so we'll be discussing the whole process from how to get the skill assessment, what kind of courses to do, and if you get the assessment, if you get the right point, and what to do and which state to follow, right? So we'll just discuss it all. And one of the main things we will keep the focus on is the questions and answers. So do write in the comment box if you have any particular questions. Try to write like as much detail as you can, or let's say all the main facts of the case, and I'll try to answer right away. Okay, so we'll try to keep it short and simple, and then we can take it from there. All right, guys. So so with that out of the way, let's just start with the presentation. We'll be really quick with the presentation because I'm assuming most of you do know about most of the steps, but still this is for people, even if one of you has not understood the proper process to follow as an IT student, then at least they know what to do. Okay, but we'll keep it really quick so that we can keep more time for the actual questions and answers, right? So yeah, so let's get ahead. All right, guys. So first of all, as I mentioned, my name is Usman Obaid. So we'll be going very quickly with the presentation, and then we'll jump right at the question and answers right away. So keep posting your question if you have it. I will not answer right away, but I'll answer right after the end of the presentation. Okay, so just bear with me. All right. So the first thing for IT occupation, the first thing is basically you have to get a skills assessment, right? Now, as most of you know, that we have to go towards basically ACS, Australian Computer Society, to get the assessment done. And the second thing is we have to figure out like what occupation we're going with, whether you're going with a software engineer, computer network and system engineer, or ICT business analyst, or systems analyst, or network admin. There are 20, 30 occupations we can choose from, and every occupation has its own nuances. The details are different, so we have to be careful what occupations are we selecting. So some, like just an example, sometimes in NSW they prefer a particular occupation. Let's say they prefer analyst programmer. Now analyst programmer is a sister occupation of a software engineer, but because the NSW government wants that occupation to be invited, they will invite in heavy numbers. So it's our job to figure out and assess what are they going for. So if they want particular occupation, we look at the trend, we look at the invitation round, we look at the points they are getting invited, and based on that we shift our clients to that particular occupation. So that's one thing. Now with the skills assessment, obviously we have 4 things we have to discuss. The first thing is qualification, like what kind of qualification do you need, and number 2, we'll talk about the professional air program in terms of how the professional air program works, and basically, do you need it or not? That's also a very common question we get, that do we really need to do professional air if we are working, or we need to do both of them, or will we get point for only one, not the 2? So there are a lot of questions. We'll try to answer all of them here. The third thing is experience requirements. Now for experience requirement, we'll discuss what kind of documents you need to prove the experience. So a lot of you might be working, or maybe have worked in their home countries, and you need to know basically how does the experience work. So we have to figure out the proper way to put up our experience in front of our skill assessment, and also to put in such a way that they it's very clear to the ACS that you have done genuine experience, right? That's one thing. And then lastly, we are talking about the PR pathways for IT graduates. Okay, so obviously, as I think the common sense dictates, qualification has to be 65% or more ICT content. This is as per their guidelines. And if it's 65% or more ICT content, it will be considered IT major. Now, IT major is very important pathway to follow now, because for example, there's some countries in which even if you have done a bachelor's degree, your degree is considered associate degree. It's not considered at the same level of an Australian bachelor's degree. Like in Bangladesh, we noted a lot of times their universities are in section 2, meaning they put in a certain way that even if someone has done a 4 years bachelor's of computer science, they'll still be considered an associate degree, not bachelor's degree in Australia. So that makes their life a lot harder. And then even at next level, you also have to look at the content. If you're, for example, if you've done electronics and communications, now your degree will be considered IT major, but if you all have to look at the content, like what is the content like, if it's 65% or not, that's like a benchmark. Okay. And obviously, when you talk about electives, that's also very important that what are your subjects? Like if your subjects lean towards business analytics, it leans towards business intelligence, those subjects, you will not be able to get a software engineer assessment based on that. You will not be able to get a networking assessment based on that. So we have to be careful. What are the electives? So that's also another element. And obviously, if you have already completed your study, then we just look at a degree and see what's the nature of your degree. Is it more towards software engineering, networking and security, or is it towards business analyst, or is it towards systems analyst? We have to look at the whole degree as a whole and then decide. Then this is a simplified version of how the assessment works, right? So you need a relevant Australian qualification. With Australian degree, you need either a professional year or experience. Okay, so if you have professional year or you have experience, you can get the skill assessment. Now, I've mentioned it's and or. So why? Because you can have both or you can have one of the two. So even if you have just a professional year, you still get the assessment and 5 points. Even if you just have, you're talking about the skill assessment, so we can get professional year or experience and get the positive assessment and 5 points for the EOI, expression of interest. Okay, now professional year is obviously one of those things that a lot of people ask us that, is it really needed? Is it really required? Or is it something you can skip? Okay. Now, professional year can be skipped. That's true. But the problem with professional year is that it's going to give you 5 points. Okay. And it's expensive. Yes, that's true. It's almost $6,000 to $7,000, depending on which month you go for. But generally, it's a very good investment. Why? Because even if you don't have the experience, you still get the assessment just because you got the professional year done. It's only 1 day a week class, okay, for 7 months, and then the next 3 months you have to go for the internship. Or if you're already working in an IT role, you can get the internship is skipped, and you can directly get the assessment letter after the 3 months. So these are the two ways to do it. Now, professional year itself, obviously it can range in prices depending which city you are in. So for example, in NSW in Sydney, we have a really good offer running. We offer it for $6,400. Okay, it's one of the cheapest professional year we can go for. And obviously, the main idea is our goal is to make sure that we keep it as cheap as possible, and we negotiate a better rate with the professional provider, so we can give benefit to all our students. Okay, so professional again is a very necessary thing. I would recommend you to all do it. Even if someone is not sure, please consider it. Okay, but the only thing is you can only do it when on the 485 visa. So it's not for everyone else. Only on the people for the people who are Australian graduates in IT degree and who have 485 visa at the moment. All right. Now this table makes it very simple. So if you have just done let's say you've done masters of IT, okay, like a standard IT degree, and then sorry, and then you just did a professional year, then you get a positive skill assessment and you get 5 points for the EY as well. If you've done experience of 1 year, you get a positive skill assessment and you get 5 points from EY. But if you get experience and professional year, you get 10 points. Okay, so that is how it adds up. Because I don't know why, but surprisingly, we get a lot of questions, people asking, oh, if I do assessment with using my professional year, will I not get points for it? Of course you will get points. So that's one thing you have to be, I'm writing it so that it's very clear. Okay, now we'll move to the next thing. Now, offshore experience is slightly different because they want, if you're using an overseas degree, let's say someone came from India and they have done BTech in computer science, okay, and they have done IT major, obviously it's an IT major degree, and they have done 2 years after the qualification, 2 years of experience after the qualification, they can also get the assessment. The only difference here is that if it's an Australian qualification, the moment you complete your qualification, everything will be counted towards the points. Okay, so let's say you complete your degree today, and after 1 year, you keep on working for next 1 year, you'll get the 5 points for the work you've done. But if I graduated from India today, I have to work for another 2 years, and then they'll just use that to give me the assessment, but they won't give me points for these 2 years. So that's a problem. So for example, if someone has 5 years of experience First 2 years will be deducted. They will be left with 3 years. That will give them 5 points only. Okay, so that's obviously a very difficult position you are in, because obviously if, we have a lot of clients who are overseas and they have 5 years, 6 years of experience, or something 8 years of experience. Now we cannot give them full 15, 20 points that they deserve, but we can only give them 5 or 10 points, because the assessing body deducts 2 years if it's IT major degree. If it's IT minor degree, then they deduct 4 years or 5 years, depending on the kind of work you're doing, the kind of degree you have. So that's also a very common thing we notice. Okay, so again, you have to be careful about it. Now, so I will just go with the experience part first. Now, with experience, this is as straightforward as it can get. So basically, obviously, we would need your qualification documents, your completion letter, your degree transcript, all those sort of documents. Along with, we need to prove you have experience. Now, how do you prove your experience? Essentially, two things. The first one, point number 2, which is experience letter with duties. This is like the most important part, because if you cannot prove on a company letterhead what were you doing for that company for the last 2 years or 3 years, you've not done the job, right? So you have to get the right letter in the right format and with the right duties. So duties are the most important part, because if some company gives you a letter, let's say Infosys says, oh, he was a software tester with us, it doesn't mean anything. The ACS will want Infosys to write very clearly, like, what duties were you doing over there? What was your task? What was your projects? What were you doing exactly? So they want you to write 8 to 10 duties and responsibilities, okay, like job description, and exactly what you are doing, so they can assess whether this is the right work for that kind of occupation or not. So that's also important. Now, in terms of the third point, now experience letter is just one part of it. Now, how do you prove that this same person has worked in that company? For example, again, let's go with Infosys. So we have to give them payment evidences. Now, payment evidences, they give you 4 choices, out of which we have to provide them 2. So, which is payslips, bank statement, provident fund, superannuation, or you have tax documents. You have to provide 2. Now, I personally, again, this is my personal thing, I personally believe arranging the payslips and bank statements is a relatively easy task. They're arranging provident fund and everything, because payslips and bank statements make it very clear that you were working for how many number of years and everything, and it makes very clear that how many basically transactions have occurred, right? So if the payslip says that you've been paid, let's say $5,000 in the month of July, the bank statement will also mention the same amount. If it say 5612.37, the bank statement also say 5612.37. So that's easy to corroborate. So that's very important. So this is, again, most people get stuck over in this part. Documentation is needed, because without you proving your bank statement, payslip, they won't believe you. They won't believe it. The letter used to be enough till I think 1st of September 2019. After that, this is compulsory. Now, more importantly, we don't need to provide all the payslip. We don't need to provide all the bank statement, because some people have 8 years of experience. So now you're not going to provide 8 years of payslips. Obviously, it's going to be hard. So obviously, provide as many as you can, especially for the last few years. But generally, the rule of thumb is that start and the end of each year should be covered. So let's say if you work from 2017 till now, so you have to give start of 2017, end of 2017, start of 2018, 18, 19, 20, 21, so that you're covering the basis all the way, right? So that's one thing. Now let's move to the next part. Now, reference letter. Now, as I mentioned, that it has to be aligned. The duties must be aligned to your nominated occupation. So this is a very tricky part, because a lot of SC refusals, because of the fact that someone was working completely different role, but their title was consultant. Now, they are not a business analyst, but they apply for business analyst, assuming that my title is consultant, so I'll be considered in that occupation. You're not. It all comes down to what's your degree like and what's your day-to-day duties like. So they look at that. So work experience should be aligned with the qualification. So it's not just IT job. It has to be a specific job. With the IT domain, it should be the right kind of job, right? So that's very important. So, and one thing, unfortunately, I have to mention, because this is, again, one of those things that it's common sense, but people still sometimes make this mistake. I've seen that happen at least 4 or 5 times. People just copy paste the ENSCO duties. The ENSCO duties is basically the guideline from the government that this particular job, as a software engineer, is supposed to be doing these kind of jobs. people just copy paste the duties and put it in the letter. It's not going to work because there's just an indication of what kind of work they require. That's not the real work, because if you look at those duties, usually they're very vague. They are not specific to the job. So if you're writing duties, make sure it's aligned towards the actual job you are doing. Like you can't to talk about working on cloud when company is like a completely different kind of company, right? So you have to be very particular. So that's very important. Now, some examples. I've made it very simple. 2 examples of this. If you look at this example, this is interesting because in this, basically, this is the person who got like computer network system engineer occupation. Okay. Now they have done a professional year program and they have done BCA from India, which is major in accounting. And then they have also done MIT computer networking from Chartered University in NSW. Okay. And they completed January 2019. All right. Now, if you notice, what they've done is immigration, because this person has done the professional year and they have done the experience of 1 year from 2019 to 2020, they got 5 points for it. And this is called a deemed date. Now, why I'm showing this is because this is a very common question we get. This is a very common issues we get. So a lot of people don't know what deemed date is. This is the deemed date, 18 January 2019. Now, how do they come to this date? Because they look at the qualification. Like, for example, this person completed their MIT degree on January 2019. Now, so any experience after the completion of the degree can be counted towards experience. So, and then he started working. If you notice, they put January 2019, which is right after the MIT completion date, and not the first day of his job, which is June 2019. Why? Because they don't care whether it's June or July, September when he starts the job. They made it very clear that the moment he completed his course, we will include every experience in IT with after that. Okay. But with that being said, we also have to obviously prove it to them. We gave them ICT support network engineer. We gave them the right kind of experience letters, everything, and obviously it worked. So that's one thing. Now, this deemed date is also evident over here. Okay. Now, this person, they completed their RMIT degree, which is Master of Business Information Technology, in July 2019. But if you notice, they have a date of 2016. Now, why is that? Because this person did not use their professional year or Australian degree, the overseas degree, because they had the assessment. They didn't have to wait for completion of 1 year in Australia or the professional year in Australia to get the assessment. They had overseas experience that they could use. So that's one thing. Now, regarding this person, if you notice, so what they've done is essentially, so they completed their Bachelor of Technology from 𝐏𝐚𝐤𝐢𝐤𝐸 University in September 2013, sorry. And then they started working outside of Australia, okay, from January 2014 to June of 2017. Okay, 3 years, 5 months. Now, so what the immigration has done is they deducted 2 years from the date of the job. So it's January 2014, they started working. On January 2016, they deducted all experience. So this is the deemed date. So for example, now what it means, this letter means is from 14th of January 2016, all experience is considered to equate to work at appropriately skill level. So meaning we can claim points after 14 January 2016. And if you notice, why is it 2016, not 2014? Because they deducted January 2014 to after 2 years of experience, they deducted and then they gave the point. So this is also one of the prime examples. But with that being said, Australian experience also being considered. Like this person is senior learning environments analyst. By the way, I don't know what that means, but anyways, interesting job. But so December 2019 to May 2020, they worked for 5 months. They have accepted it. So even if you're using overseas degree, again, a very common misconception that if you have an overseas degree, you cannot use Australian experience. You can. So this is again one of those things. So just to give you an example. Now, I'm just going to give a big disclaimer. Most of the states are closed right now. All the major states for IT are getting revamped, like NSW, Victoria, South Australia, even Western Australia. So we will have those states open up in the next 1.5 months. Probably by mid of September, we'll have all the states opened up. It happened last year as well. They took a lot of time. So most states opened up in August, and then NSW was the last one to open up on 8th of September 2022. This year, we're expecting something similar to happen as well. So we're expecting in the next 2-3 weeks, most of the states will open up. But uh, don't worry about it, because what I've done is I've kept a simplified version of what the states historically they want, right? So historically, this is what they require. Even the last year, this was similar requirements. But obviously, if there's anything, let's say, anything very different or anything in terms of, let's say, uh, whatever they update, whenever they update the occupation list, they update the eligibility criteria, we will definitely be doing a lot more webinars so we can cover all of that. Because I understand that right now we are giving you most of the information, but the last 30% will be completed once the states are open. So I'll be able to give you the best advices, like what state to do, to consider, what state to move to, like those kind of things. But we have to wait for that a little. But for now, let's just quickly recap them quickly, and then we'll move to the question answers. All right. So yeah. So NSW generally for 190, they as per the last requirement, they wanted to you just meet the points. That's it. So and the points got down quite a bit. So for example, network engineer was still at 90 points. Systems analyst was at 85 points. So it is different for each occupation. Okay. So if you're going with network admin, it was probably 75 to 80 points. So it goes based on the occupation. Okay, so that's one thing. Now with 491 NSW had 3 pathways. One of the pathways was you apply, work for one employer for the whole year. Okay, and as long as your salary level is $4,000 and above, you can still get an invitation. This was like very hard. The second thing was slightly easier, which is that you apply directly to the RD office. Now there are 14 RDs in NSW. You could apply to any one of those, and they can still invite you. And there were some really good invitations we received. And for the people who were not likely to get their 190 invitation, they were not likely to meet any of the criteria for most states. So they just tried this and this worked while living in Sydney. So that's also a very interesting point, that I have clients personally, even accountants. I'll give you an example. I have a client, he's an external auditor from India. He has 85 points of his own. He couldn't have gotten a 190 visa. So we applied for his RDA application, and it worked. He got the 491 nomination. But obviously, it's not 190, but 491 is still pretty good. You still get to live in Australia. You still get to convert it into PR after 3 years. You still get to get the Medicare card. You still can do anything you want after you get the 491, because you must live in a regional area, but not a particular regional area, right? So you can play around. So you can go to different cities. So that's also an angle. The last part is invitation by NSW pathway. Now, this is purely points. So what it means is basically, if you have the right points, you can get invited. Now, the invitation was like pretty much a month-to-month basis, and they were inviting a lot of people. But what I noticed was the last few months, they pretty much removed most of the IT occupations from NSW 491. So that was kind of a disappointing thing to see. But they were trying to favor engineers, because for a long time, engineers were not getting invited. So that's why I think they were trying to balance the two. But generally, they can invite you directly, even if you're living in Sydney. But obviously, you have to live in NSW. If you're not living in NSW, they will not consider you. So their requirement is very clear. If you're interstate, let's say you're in Melbourne, you want to apply to NSW, you have to live here for at least 6 months for 190 and 3 months for the 491. Otherwise, you would not be considered a resident of NSW. So resident of NSW is the critical thing. But for Victoria, is opposite. There's no minimum state requirement. You can just go there for a single day or 2 days, and you are considered a resident already. Even if you don't have all the documents ready, you'll still be considered a resident. And especially if you have a job there and you have really good chance of getting the invitation, then obviously they won't bother too much with the documentation, right? So that's also a thing. So now let's move to the next part, which is Victoria. Now, Victoria process is slightly different. So what they do is you lodge the EOI, you lodge the ROI, registration of interest, in which you have to mention what occupation you're in, what company you're working for, what kind of sale you're making, and then they shortlist you, and then you apply for the nomination. Now, after the nomination has been approved, then you apply the visa. Now, one of the key 5 factors you notice are points, salary, skill employment, whether you work in your own field or not. And even if you're working in any other field, make sure it's level 1 to 3. Most occasions are in level 1 to 3, but that's also important. Now, English is obviously important factor for them as well, then age, and then the priority sector, whether you're working in high-tech sector or not, whether you're working in the green sector or not. So they'll look at those factors and try to invite you. So that's also a possibility. Now, other than Victoria, South Australia is very active, but South Australia has not been too kind to IT students generally. So that's why I do not recommend IT students to consider South Australia as their main state, because they've been quite hard. Like for example, last year, most IT occupation, they needed to work for 2 years in their own occupation to get the 190 visa. So it didn't make a lot of sense. Okay, because those same people, if they had just worked a little harder in Sydney or Melbourne, they could have gotten the PR. So even Canberra was slightly better than South Australia. So, so that's why South Australia is not, I would say, the most ideal state we can consider for IT especially. For other occupations, yes, South Australia is wonderful, but not IT particularly, unless you have graduated there. So graduate pathway is always easy, because if you have a Western Australia. Now, Western Australia, Perth, basically, is an excellent option. Okay. So what they've done is basically they've made the rules very straightforward that, okay, we don't care about too much about the points. We care mainly about your, sorry about that. So what they've said is that we mainly care about your points and your offer letter. So Western Australia is pretty solid, and if you have a good profile, that's a real possibility. And a lot of people who don't have really good points, let's say you are 70, 75-ish, you can just get the 491, because 491 in Western Australia, you get to live in Perth. Perth is almost 2.5 million people, and that's like half the size of Sydney. And that's a proper city with a CBD, with their own companies, own setups, or like a lot of opportunities over there. So Perth is a really good opportunity to consider. For IT graduates, generally is pretty solid. But now there's another city you can consider, which is Queensland. Now, Queensland is basically, for 190, they want you to work for 6 months and get to at least 80 points, and they want you to work for 35 hours per week. For 490, their rule is 3 months of working for 20 hours a week in regional area. That is all of Queensland minus Brisbane. So if you do that, you can get eligible for the 491 as well. So generally speaking, 190, 491 are both possible in Queensland, but obviously Queensland is a tough nut to crack, because they're very unpredictable in a lot of ways, meaning they some months they invite in heavy numbers, some months they just completely be quiet. So they're quite unpredictable and quite moody in that regard. So that's why I would rather not keep, let's say, Queensland as a primary option for IT graduates generally. So, okay, so now that's the last thing I wanted to talk about. Now, just with that being said, now I'll just say one important part. All states will be opening up the updated occupation list and updated eligibility criteria in the next 2 to 4 weeks. Okay, so that's going to happen. Okay, that's one of the reasons we try to put our webinar by the mid of this month, so we can wait for the assessment, most of the states to open up. But have no worries at all. If whenever they have proper updates for most states, we will do another session, and we will do a longer, more proper, more detailed conversation about what to do, and we can have a discussion case to case as well to figure out who should do what, right? So we'll figure that all out. So anyways, that's one thing. Now, guys, just mention, first of all, thank you for attending. And obviously, these are our branches. Okay, so obviously in Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. In Melbourne, it says we have 3 branches. In Sydney, we're in the main CBD. So if you have any questions, write to us at nsw@asiapacificgroup.com, or you have the number, give us a call. Now we'll just head towards, or the easy thing is just give us an email at nsw@asiapacificgroup.com. Send us your resume, or write out your, like, you don't have to send a resume. You can just write out your question and your situation in as much detail as you can, and then we'll, one of our migration agents, one of our consultants will be there for you. We'll try to assist you in the best way possible, right? So that's one thing. Now, let's talk about the question. Now, if there are questions, let's go one by one. Okay, I think I can see a couple of questions. Just a second. Okay. Okay, so Atisham is saying that, hi, I'm based in NSW Regional. I have 85 plus 5 points. I have sales assessment in computer network system engineer, and also an ICT manager, NSC. Any chances for 119 NSW? Thanks a lot. Oh, yes, Atisham, definitely. You have 85 plus 5 points. These are pretty solid, considering the current trend when the points are going down and the number of seats are still constant. So there's a very good chance you can get invited. But the only thing we have to change is your occupation. So I would recommend sending us your resume. We obviously we have to talk about what occupations can we get based on your qualification. But most probably you can go with systems analyst, one of those occupations with 85 points already. Like I have a ton of clients who have done networking based degrees, and then they got the assessment as a systems analyst. Right now, systems analyst means the invite is there 85 points within 2 months, 1 month. So it's rather quick. So I've already done this for most of my clients. That can also happen for you, but obviously we'll have to assess whether you can get the assessment or not, whether you have the right experience and those sort of things. But yeah, but it's possible. 85 is good enough point that you don't need to give up on the 190 team. You don't need to let's say forgo 190 for the 491. Basically, that's the idea. So you can still go for the 190. So I think that's definitely doable. Okay. Now let's move to the next question. Neelam is saying, hi, on which stage we have to provide Indian PCC in 186 direct entry company sponsor visa? Is initially when you launch the EOI or after nomination get approved, accordingly I'll apply. Okay. Yes. So basically, okay. So I'll just clear one concept. I think you're mixing two things up. First of all, whichever visa you apply for, whether it's 186 direct entry or whether you are on, let's say, a PR visa, whichever visa you are on, you have to provide your PCC at the time of visa lodgement. Now, the rule is you don't have to have it at the time of visa lodgement. As long as you submit the visa, you can upload it later as well. That's fine. So it's not compulsory that you have to have it before that. So you can apply it. Like I have a lot of clients, they get the invitation and they know a PCC will take a couple of weeks to come through. So they don't want to waste their time. So what do? We lodge a visa within 2-3 days of the invitation. And then they upload their police clearance certificate later. Because a lot of people, like Indian police clearance is still relatively easy. If you get it from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Jordan, Hong Kong, Singapore, nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. Like Singapore is a different game. It makes your life really hard. So with all that going on, so obviously you can't delay visa. You only have 60 days to apply for the visa. So obviously if you're going for the 189, 190 or the 491, you have to submit the visa and upload it as soon as you get the certificate. That's the right way. But obviously if you have it, that's ideal. But obviously most people don't have the police certificate ready. That's one thing. Now, second thing, you're mentioning two different things. You're saying that on which state we have to provide the PCC 186 direct entry company sponsor visa. Now, 186 company sponsor visa means that you apply for the nomination, then you apply the visa, and again, once you submit the visa at that time or a little after that, you can upload the PCC. Okay, so that's one thing. Now, when you say you launch the EOI is a different game. EOI is for 189, 194. Like, why would you apply for the 189 or 190 when you already have the 186 in your hand? Doesn't make sense because both are PR. If you have 186, you are a PR holder. Why would you need to go for the 189 or 190 visa? So essentially, that's also a question you have to think about. Or if you're already applying for the 186 and have already applied for the 189, 190 EOI, then don't worry about it. If the EOI gets picked up, you get the invitation. When you launch the visa, at that time you have to submit it, not before that. So you're good. Okay. So that's one thing, Neelam. I hope it helps. Sushmita saying that for PY, when you mentioned that having a job means we get an assessment without an internship, doesn't mean we don't need to do the internship. Oh yeah. So here's the thing. Yeah, this is one of those unfair things that is in the system. Even if you are employed in IT job, even then you have to wait for the 3 months. So let's say 7 months is completed in PY. You're doing the professional year. First 7 months is studies. You complete that. The last 3 months basically should be an internship, right? So if you're not doing an internship, they should give you a certificate, correct? But they don't. What they do is they say, no, you still have to complete the 3 months. And once you complete the 3 months, then we'll give you the certificate, which is kind of unfair, but it is how it is because they go batch to batch. Like you'll get it the same day as the guy or your class fellows you started with. So that's unfortunately the case. Okay. So that's one thing. Now, Ayush is asking if your title is different but your duties align, can that work? Do they verify the experience in details for your employer? Like if we have work overseas? Well, title and duties are should be aligned. Obviously, like it wouldn't, like if, for example, if I'm saying I'm a registered migration agent, but then I'm doing only the marketing work. They will raise a question that, dude, are you a migration agent or are you just a marketing person, right? Or are you just an accountant? So this is obviously a very critical point. So we have to, Ayush, we have to look at this factor that it has to be aligned with the same domain at least. Like, for example, like the one example I showed you, actually, interestingly, just look at this example. Let me show you again. If you look at this person, I think this is a perfect example. The degree says computer networking. Even the occupation is computer networking system engineer. Okay, like level 1. But if you notice, his title is ICT support network engineer. So this is a support engineer role. So he should be getting ICT support engineer. But because his duties were correct, he got the assessment even with this title, because his duties were correct. So it all comes down to the duties, like, do you have the right duties or not? So so again, it comes down to the same thing. Okay, so that's one thing. So yeah, so basically, generally they should align, but primarily they look at the duties, and then obviously they look at title as well. But if it's too far away, like they write it like a completely different, like you just a consultant is a generic. Like if they put a consultant, analyst kind of role, it's generic. You can put whatever duties you want, it's fine. But if it's something very specific, like network engineer, but then you get assessment as software engineer, it doesn't work, right? It's mismatch. So they will look at it. So duties is the primary thing, title is the secondary. So guys, I'll take some more questions. Okay, Sanilam Sushmita is done. Okay, Samshita, sorry, yeah, I hope I'm pronouncing right. So she's asking systems enlist IT graduate knowledge training program in the past 15 months. I've got a skills in IC, I got 95 point now, trying to get 10 points of PT to make it 95, but a chance of getting it right. I'm looking at Darwin, things advanced. Well, okay. So if you have studied in Darwin, then 190 is pretty much in the bank. So anyway, so yes, for some Sita, the answer is very straightforward. That if you get 80, even if you don't get it, if you've studied in Darwin with 85 points, you should be fine. But if you are talking about the 189 particularly, then yes, the higher the points, the better. That's because generally 90 points is kind of the is what will be needed for systems analysts and business analysts. But 85 can work. 85 can work. So the only thing would be you have to wait for 2 rounds or something, but it is possible. But 189 with 85 points is possible for systems analysts. That's a simple answer. Well, I'll keep the answer really quick so that it doesn't become too hard for you to like keep joining back in. Right. So yeah. So Navaraj is saying that can we apply NSB 491 only from skill assessment done from PY? Yes, of course you can. If you have a skill assessment, you can apply 189, 190, 491, doesn't matter as long as you have the right points. Okay. Sushmita is asking, does the content of overseas batches make a difference if you have a Master of IT degree from Australia? No, it does not. It does not make any difference, because if you've done an overseas degree and then you've done a Master of IT, it depends what are you basing your assessment on. So if you're basing your assessment on, because the option, even if you apply a skill assessment, they give you a couple of options. Which pathway are you following? Australian study, skills pathway, RPL, there's multiple pathways. So if you're going with Australian study, obviously they won't care about what you've done in batches. They just take a look at it. They won't bother about it. Okay. Saroj is asking, my offer letter says IT support engineer. Can I do skills in network and system engineer if my employer makes a letter? Yes. Like I showed you an example. I hope you were there. I already showed an example that that person was a network support network engineer. Even that worked. So it is possible. We have done a lot of cases like that. But it all comes down to it has to be logical, based on the company and based on the title, and the duties shouldn't put you in such a way that it's so that, oh, Saroj is doing everything. He's a all-in-all for CIO of our company. It should be reasonable. Like, they expect this person, a new person, to be doing this kind of role. So that's how we put it. But yes, Saroj, it's definitely possible. But it's all about how you put it in front of them, right? That's one thing, reasonably. Now, Kshitij has asked, I've completed my Bachelor of Networking in PY. I have skill assessment admin. How many points required to get invited? Or what occupation is best for me to apply for skill assessment? Well, I think network admin, there are very few people in the system. I think less than 200-300. Very few people. As compared to network engineers, that's 1/10, 1/20th pretty much the number of the people in the queue. So invite again is we have to see the new invitation out to see the trend, but I would, again, this is my personal estimate, it could be around 75 80 easily. Okay, so that's possible. Now Emu is saying does MSc from Bangladesh consider BSc in Australia? Well, Emu, that's a very difficult question, because how it works is we with Bangladesh particularly, not with so much with other countries. I don't know why, but for Bangladesh, they don't equate the same bachelor to bachelor. Like the same guy who's done, let's say, bachelor's of engineering from a particular university, let's say University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh, right? ULAB. So it's a very popular university. You do that. They don't consider the bachelor degree as an Australian bachelor's, but the same, I have clients in the same university who study in University of Sydney, University of Melbourne, top-notch universities, they get admission over there. So I don't know what's the logic behind it. For skill assessment purposes, they don't assess them as equal to bachelor's. They give them a downgraded associate degree status. Okay, so that's why you need 4 years instead of 2 years for the assessment. So that makes it quite hard. So, but the best thing is, Emu, if you could just send us your CV, your transcript. Obviously, we can set up a meeting or something with a consultant, and we'll figure out like what's the best line of action for you. Okay, and guys, our email address I'm just writing down here. Please note it. We are always available. Obviously, we go based on the appointment booking, but so basically, you can. I'm just gonna mention our email address. Just email us. It goes to our front desk team, and they will assign you to the right migration agent. I'm one of the migration agent. So here, so we can figure out like what's the best pathway onwards for you. Right? So do email us. We'll try to help you the best way we can. Okay, so we'll set up something like that. So that's one thing. Now I'll go down. Atharva is saying, in my assessment for one of my experience, it is remarked and cannot be assessed because of insufficient detail. What can be the reason? I submitted work experience, letter, salary slips, employment statement. What's the problem? Well, we have to see what went wrong there, because sometimes it happens like you have given them everything. They made a couple of calls. They try to look into it. They just don't think it's genuine sometimes, but they don't want to say it is fake or forged. They just say, we don't think it's sufficient evidence, because they don't need to give you a reason for that. So they can just pick up the easiest thing they need to say without justifying it, that we don't think it's sufficient, but you have done everything. So obviously there could be a lot of factors. Sometimes they call the employer and figure out like, what is he doing? What is this guy doing? So they're not satisfied with the answers. There are a lot of factors, and so we'll have to again see in detail like what went wrong there. Now Nayan Bhoval is saying, I've already completed a skill assessment in engineering technologist. By the way, it's not engineering technologist, technologist occupation. Though my bachelor's degree in my home country, through my bachelor's degree in Bangladesh, currently I'm pursuing MTech. Now I'm residing in Sydney. I've 60 points for for 49 visa. I'm looking for guidance on which professional state should be advantageous. Okay. So first thing, if you're doing master technology or ME master engineering in Australia, then you have to figure out like what exactly are you doing, whether you're doing in mechanical or civil, or what, it depends on that as well. But obviously you have the engineering technology assessment. Engineering technologist is a very vague assessment. Everyone can get it. So there's not much value we put on it, to be honest. It's like it's okay. Unless you have really high points, it will help. Otherwise, it's going to be tough. So if you are a civil engineer, mechanical engineer, and then you're engineering technologist, so points will be much lower for civil and mechanical as compared to engineering technology. So that's just one thing you have to consider. So I would say talk to us. Give us an email. I've shared the email below. Give us an email. We'll figure out what's the best, or give us a call. What's the best engineering you can do to get the most advantage out of it, or which state you should study. Because NSW does not give you any benefit to study. Unfortunately, they don't give you any benefit. So that's why we might have to move you to a different state. But again, we have to discuss this. Like you have to figure out like what's the best way to do it. Okay. Shida is saying, thank you very much, straightforward, clear. Thank you so much. She's saying, what occupation best to apply for skill assessment for networking graduates without IT job background? So Shida is the same thing. Network admin is one of the good occupations. System admin is also pretty good, but we have to figure out like what's the best way to, it depends on see, I'll give you an example. if you're software engineer, then we give you different advice. If you're network engineer, we give different advice. We have to figure out what's the closely occupation for your degree based, right? So based on the degree, we'll give you advice. So that's one thing. So yeah, anyway, so guys, I think before this gets cut off again, I will say thank you to all, and I would say apology for all the mix up and all the the call keeps getting cut, but thank you for sticking around, thank you for joining back again and again. But you have an email address which is nsw@asiapacificgroup.com. Please email us, please give us a call. We are there. We are present in Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Philippines, Cambodia, and we are in Pakistan and India, of course, but we'll be moving to other countries very soon, so you will find us everywhere. All right, so thank you so much for joining. Thank you. Take care.